conflict in the western counties began in the Tigard Valley. From there, Union generals hoped to push south and sever the Virginia and Tennessee Railroad below Salem. The V&T was the South's principal east-west supply line. Lincoln called it the gut of the Confederacy. If successful, the strategy would deny the Confederacy the region's natural resources of lead, iron, salt, and coal, open a backdoor route to Richmond, and fulfill Lincoln's dream of liberating Unionist East Tennessee. Union generals underestimated the difficulties posed by the mountainous terrain. Looking only at a map, said one officer, it seemed an easy thing to do. Federal troops commanded by George McClellan crossed the Ohio River and initiated the first land battle of the Civil War when they routed Confederates at Philippi, Virginia. They soon moved into Randolph County, where they defeated Confederates at Rich Mountain and Corrick's Ford. In barely 6 weeks, the Confederate frontier had been collapsed far backwards into the Allegheny Mountains. 10 counties of Virginians who had voted to side with the Confederacy came under Union control. Irregulars who hid among the civilian population contested Union occupancy of the Tigard region. Unionists organized Home Guard units made up of 25 to 50 recruits, some as young as 14. Both took hostages, pillaged, and killed their neighbors. Soldiers soon matched the violence of the guerrillas. The Union commander admitted to depredations of an atrocious character. The property of inoffensive people, McClellan wrote, has been lawlessly and violently taken, their houses broken open, and in some instances burned to the ground. McClellan also sent troops into Hampshire and Hardy counties, causing civilians there to plead in vain to Richmond for assistance. Our houses have been forcibly entered and robbed. Our horses, cattle, and sheep in large numbers driven off. Our citizens arrested, carried off, and confined only because they are loyal citizens of Virginia and the Southern Confederacy. Worried about defending Richmond, the Confederate government was unwilling to help. Consequently, Hampshire, Hardy, Pendleton, and Morgan counties, although they had voted for secession, would have to be forsaken. Irregular warfare would continue in the Tigard Valley and eastern Panhandle until Appomattox. Three Confederate generals, including Robert E. Lee, proved unable to drive the Federals from the Kanawha Valley in the first year of the war. Exasperated secessionists like John Sanner reported that some of the militia told him it was their intention not to fight anymore, unless it would be to shoot some of their damned officers who had dragged them from home. Nevertheless, Confederate raiding parties continued the war throughout the Kanawha Valley. In November 1861, Confederate Colonel Albert Gallatin Jenkins's Border Rangers were among 700 in a unit that launched a surprise attack against the town of Guyandotte, a small fort on the Ohio River, and home to a Union camp for new recruits. After the triumphant Confederates withdrew the following day, Union soldiers from the 5th Virginia Infantry arrived. Hearing rumors that residents of Guyandotte collaborated with the enemy, the enraged Federals burned the town. According to the governor of the proposed new state, the Guyandotte raid left the far southwestern counties in a state of perfect anarchy, no one claiming to hold a civil office, and a perfect terrorism paralyzes every effort to restore law and order in that region. In the eastern Kanawha Valley, slaves flocked to Union lines, and secessionists abandoned entire towns to their Unionist neighbors. When the majority of the Federal troops withdrew in the summer of 1862, the Confederates attempted to regain control of the region.
I'll be there in a minute.
Intent on capturing Charleston, they outwitted and outgunned the Federal
I'll be there in a minute.
which escaped across the Ohio River. The occupation of Charleston was a homecoming to many Virginia men in the Confederate Confederate ranks, including Colonel George Smith Patton, who was reunited with his family. Killed 2 years later at Winchester, Patton would not live to meet his grandson, who served as a general in World War II. Secessionists occupied Charleston for 6 weeks, but withdrew. A decisive Confederate defeat at Droop Mountain a year later brought an end to major military activities in the Kanawha region. 10 counties that had voted to remain with Virginia and side with the Confederacy had been lost to the Commonwealth forever. Following the rapid Union military occupation of the Tigard and Kanawha valleys and the eastern Panhandle, the Confederacy could continue the struggle in the West only by launching large-scale raids by regular units and encouraging the activities of guerrilla groups. In 1862, John Daniel Imboden invaded the Tigard Valley with 150 regular infantry. At the same time, Albert Gallatin Jenkins, working with troops in the Kanawha Valley to regain that region, swept around to the northwest with 550 cavalry and fell upon the Union forces at the Ohio end of the valley. His circuitous route initially baffled the Union Army. In April 1863, just before the Battle of Chancellorsville, Imboden joined with William E. Grumble Jones to lead nearly 5,000 infantry on an ambitious 1,100-mile trek to destroy the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad and retake the western counties. Town after town was occupied. Bridges, trains, and tracks were destroyed. Federal supplies were seized. The new state government panicked. Large-scale incursions into the Tigard Valley continued even into 1865. On January 11th, at 3 in the morning, Thomas L. Rosser and 300 cavalry recaptured Beverly, the county seat of Randolph County, by braving high waters and cold weather. They captured 580 Union soldiers. Encouraged by the early successes of guerrilla units in the contested western counties, Confederate Governor John Letcher persuaded the Virginia legislature in 1862 to authorize additional companies. He called them Partisan Rangers. The units, already active, including the Border Rangers of Albert Gallatin Jenkins, who continued to raid the border counties of Cabell, Mason, Jackson, and Putnam, were regular Confederate soldiers. So were the Rangers of Robert Caskey in Fayette and Raleigh counties. Most of the newer companies were non-uniformed and independent of the Confederate Army. In Wayne County, guerrillas under Bill Smith were active. Nearby, the Logan Wildcats were formed by Anderson, Devil Anse, Hatfield. In 1864, they ignited the legendary feud between the Hatfields and McCoys when they murdered returning Union soldier Asa Harmon McCoy. Arthur Borman, governor of the proposed new state, complained of the difficulty in the Southwest to keep up county organization for the execution of civil law. There are from 300 to 400 guerrillas who are robbing the people and capturing and carrying them off. To the north, counties that had voted to join the Confederacy were in turmoil. In Calhoun County, bands known as Moccasin Rangers disrupted local government, looted stores, and thwarted mail service. Perry Conley led one group. Daniel Dusky led another, as did young Nancy Hart, the lady guerrilla. Motivated by the killing of her brother-in-law by Union soldiers, 16-year-old Nancy Hart joined the Rangers, where she served as a guide and spy. She reputedly escaped imprisonment by shooting one of her guards with his own gun and then diving headlong out of a second-story window.
Wow.
To pursue the Moccasins, Union authorities organized their own guerrilla bands, the most famous being the Snake Hunters, led by John P. Baggs. In 1862, John Hanson McNeil resisted the Yankee military occupation of the eastern Panhandle. For 2 years, his guerrilla rangers, who were enrolled as a regular company in the 18th Virginia Cavalry and numbered as many as 200, disrupted traffic and communications on the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, the main federal link between East and West. In 1863, West Virginia Governor Borman complained, "We are in worse condition than we were a year ago. People dare not sleep at home, but in the woods, and are in constant fear of their lives. The secessionists remain at home and are safe, and now claim they are in the Southern Confederacy," which is practically the fact. In retaliation, in Braxton and neighboring Webster counties, Union General George Crook implemented the no prisoners policy he had used in the Pacific Northwest against Indians. His spies murdered suspected bushwhackers, burned out the entire county of Webster, ambushed civilians in Greenbrier County, and spread terror throughout the region. With the assistance of federal troops, Unionists in the western counties eventually triumphed, but their struggle remained bitter to the end. By 1865, 17-year-old Cyrene Bunton, a Unionist in Upshur County, was ready to give up. "I have no aim in life, nothing to make me wish to live, and I often wonder what will become of me,"